truck slid sideways on black ice and the rear door burst open into the storm. Snow swallowed the road as something small and white tumbled out, then, impossibly, crawled uphill against the wind. It didn't run. It stopped, lifted its head, and made a thin, broken sound that didn't belong to fear. It sounded like a plea. And when the man took one step closer, it didn't back away. It waited. The storm had already made the world disappear. There was no road anymore, only a pale blur where the mountain should have ended and the sky should have begun. Wind slammed against the broken truck in hard, bitter waves, rocking the frame on its bent axle. Somewhere beneath the hood, metal clicked and hissed, cooling too fast in the freezing air. Caleb Ward pushed his shoulder against the driver's door until it gave with a groan. He fell out sideways into knee-deep snow. For a moment he stayed there on his hands and knees, breathing white clouds into the dark, waiting for the mountain to stop spinning. His left ribs burned. His palm stung. The taste of iron sat at the back of his mouth, sharp and familiar. Above him, the headlights pointed uselessly into the storm, catching nothing but snowflakes rushing past like sparks from a dead fire. Then he heard it. Not the wind, not the engine, not the ticking wreckage. A small sound. Caleb lifted his head. The rear of the truck had been torn open when it hit the guardrail. One door hung crooked, banging softly in the gusts. Crates had shifted inside. Blankets, broken straps, and emergency supplies lay scattered across the snow. And just beyond the spilled cargo, something pale moved. At first, Caleb thought it was a torn sack, a piece of canvas dragged by the wind. Then it lifted its head. A cub, small, white, shivering so hard its whole body seemed to flicker against the snow. Caleb stopped breathing. He had hauled animals before. Rescues, transfers, frightened creatures moved from one temporary place to another, but nothing like this. The cub was too young to be alone, too weak to survive the cold, and too impossible to belong on this mountain road. Its fur was not the clean white of storybooks. It was wet, clumped, darkened at the belly and legs where snow had soaked through. Its ears lay low. Its paws slipped every time it tried to stand. Caleb took one step forward. The cub froze. He raised both hands slowly, though the gesture felt foolish in the storm. "Easy," he said, his voice rough, nearly stolen by the wind. "I'm not going to hurt you." The cub stared at him. Its eyes were not wild in the way Caleb expected. They were glassy with cold, but fixed, searching, measuring. Then it opened its mouth and made that thin, broken sound again. A plea, if animals could plead. Caleb looked down the mountain. The road curved back toward the town, toward lights, phones, help. Logic stood there with open arms. Get the cub inside. Find warmth. Call someone when the signal returned. Do what a sane man would do. But the cub did not look down the road. It turned toward the ridge. Caleb followed its gaze and felt something old move under his skin. The slope above the wreck was steep, cut with black pine and buried stone. No shelter waited there. No people. No rescue station, just the high country, swallowed in white. The cub tried to walk, one paw forward, then another. It slipped, hit the snow with its chest, and lay still for 3 breaths. Caleb moved toward it, but the cub lifted its head again, stubborn as a candle in wind, and dragged itself uphill. "Wrong way," Caleb whispered. The cub stopped, not because it understood the words, because Caleb had spoken. Slowly it turned its head back to him. Snow clung to its whiskers. Its small body trembled so violently that Caleb could see the effort it took just to remain upright. Yet it did not come to him. It did not flee from him either. It waited. That was what unsettled him most. Not fear, not trust, expectation. Caleb looked again toward the lower road. He could almost feel the warmth that might exist somewhere below. Imagined the red glow of a diner sign, the smell of coffee, the ordinary mercy of human noise. Then he looked at the cub, standing crooked in the storm, facing a mountain no fragile thing should choose. His hand drifted to the strap of the emergency pack. 5 minutes, he told himself. It was a lie, and some quiet part of him knew it. He pulled the pack free from the wreck, slung it over one shoulder, and stepped into the cub's tracks. The little white lion turned uphill again, as if that was all it had been waiting for. Caleb followed. The wind closed behind them, erasing the truck light by light, until the road below became only a memory. And ahead, through the blowing snow, the ridge began to take the shape of a place Caleb had sworn he would never climb again. The wind climbed higher with them, sharper now, cutting through fabric and bone like it had been waiting for this moment all along. Caleb kept his eyes on the ground, not the horizon. Up here, looking too far ahead was a mistake. The mountain liked to play tricks. Distances stretched, shapes shifted, and what seemed close could swallow hours. But the cub didn't hesitate. It moved in short, uneven bursts, slipping, catching itself, then pressing forward again with a stubborn rhythm that made no sense for something so close to collapse. Caleb adjusted the strap on his shoulder and followed. He didn't try to get too close anymore. The first time he stepped within arm's reach, the cub had stiffened, not in fear, but in refusal. It wasn't asking to be carried. It wasn't asking to be saved the way people understood saving. Whatever it needed lay ahead, not behind. That realization sat wrong in his chest. "Easy," he muttered under his breath, though he wasn't sure if he meant it for the cub or himself. The terrain shifted underfoot. Snow thinned in patches, revealing dark stone beneath, slick, uneven, dangerous. Caleb's boots slipped more than once, forcing him to slow down, to match the cub's broken pace. He noticed then how often it paused, not just from exhaustion, but to look back. Not panicked, not pleading, checking. Each time, Caleb would still be there, and each time the cub would turn forward again, continuing its climb. The pattern unsettled him more than any sudden movement could have. After a while, the silence between them began to feel deliberate. No other animals, no distant calls, just wind and breath and the steady, fragile determination of something that should have given up already. Caleb swallowed against the dryness in his throat. He knew this mountain, not every inch of it, but enough. A ridge cut through the upper slopes, narrow and unforgiving. Beyond it, the terrain dipped into a basin that rarely saw direct sunlight this time of year. Snow collected there in thick, uneven drifts. It was the kind of place that held on to things, cold, quiet, and forgotten. He hadn't thought about that basin in years, hadn't allowed himself to. The cub slipped again, harder this time, its body hitting the ground with a dull thud. It stayed there longer than before. Caleb felt the shift immediately, the difference between fatigue and something deeper. He stepped forward without thinking. "Hey, hey." The cub didn't recoil. It didn't move at all. Caleb crouched slowly, keeping his movements measured. Up close, he could see how shallow its breathing had become, each inhale catching just slightly, like something inside was struggling to keep pace. "This isn't going to work," he said quietly. The words felt like truth. The road was behind them. Shelter was behind them. Whatever this cub was chasing, whatever instinct was driving it uphill, was going to kill it if something didn't change. Caleb glanced back over his shoulder. The storm had thickened. The path down was already half erased, the truck long gone from sight. Going back wouldn't be simple anymore, but it was still possible. He looked at the cub again. Its eyes opened. For a second, they didn't seem to see him. Then they did. And something in that gaze, something steady, something that refused to fade, even as the body beneath it failed, locked onto him with quiet insistence. Caleb exhaled slowly. "You don't even know what you're doing," he said, though his voice had lost its edge. The cub blinked, then slowly dragged one paw forward, not toward him, forward. Caleb closed his eyes for a brief moment, the wind pressing against his back like a hand trying to push him downhill. He could feel it now, clearer than before. Not memory exactly. Something closer to a place he had avoided naming. The angle of the slope, the shape of the rock line to the east. The way the wind shifted as it passed over the ridge. He opened his eyes again. "No," he whispered. The cub moved again, forcing itself upright with visible effort. It stood for only a moment before its legs trembled, but that was enough. It turned its head, not fully, just slightly, and waited. Caleb's jaw tightened. He had stood on this mountain once before, staring at the same climb, telling himself he would go farther, that he would not stop, that he would not turn back this time. He had turned back anyway. The thought came fast, sharp, unwelcome. "Not this way," he said, louder now, as if saying it might make it true. The cub didn't respond. It simply took another step, and another, moving toward a line of jagged rock half hidden by drifting snow. Caleb's pulse began to climb. He knew where that line led, or at least where it used to lead. His hands curled into fists inside his gloves. The cold bit deeper now, or maybe he just noticed it more. Either way, something had shifted. This was no longer just a strange animal doing something it shouldn't. This was a direction, a choice, and it wasn't random. The cub stumbled again, nearly collapsing, but caught itself just enough to stay upright. It didn't look back this time. It didn't need to. Caleb stared at the narrow passage ahead, the one cut between rock and wind, the one that led to a place he had buried under years of silence. His breath came slower now. He stepped forward, and as his boot pressed into the snow, he realized with a cold, creeping certainty, this wasn't just where the cub was going. It was where he had left something behind. The wind shifted, coming harder from the side, forcing Caleb to angle his body just to stay upright. Snow no longer fell in soft patterns. It drove sideways now, stinging his face, finding every gap in his jacket. The mountain had changed its tone. What had felt distant before was now immediate, pressing in from every direction, closing the space between choices. Ahead, the cub faltered. It didn't fall all at once. Its front legs buckled first, then its body followed, folding into the snow with a dull, quiet finality that made Caleb's chest tighten. He stopped where he was. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. Then Caleb looked back. There was nothing behind him anymore. No road, no tracks he could trust. Just a slope of white leading down into uncertainty. But it was still down, still closer to warmth, still the direction that made sense. He took a step that way. His boot sank deep, the snow giving just enough to make the motion feel real, like a beginning. Another step. The wind pushed harder at his back now, almost eager, as if the mountain itself approved of his decision to leave. Then he heard it. Not a cry, not even a sound, the absence of one. Caleb turned. The cub hadn't followed. It lay exactly where it had fallen, its small body barely visible beneath the thin veil of snow beginning to gather over it. No movement, no effort to rise again, just stillness, the kind that didn't argue. Caleb stood there, halfway between two directions, his breath coming uneven now. He told himself it was the cold, the altitude, the exhaustion. But the truth pressed in anyway. If he kept walking, the cub would not get up. And if the cub did not get up, the climb would end here, a simple equation, one he had solved before. Caleb swallowed hard, his throat tightening as something old began to surface, something he had spent years pushing down, reshaping, explaining away, until it no longer had sharp edges. He could leave. There were reasons, good ones, practical ones, the kind that people would understand if he ever told the story. The storm, the terrain, the fact that the animal had no business being here in the first place. He could leave, and it would make sense. He took another step downhill. It felt heavier this time. His chest tightened, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something that refused to stay buried any longer. The slope beneath his feet blurred for a moment, not from snow, but from memory, forcing its way into the present. A different day, a different climb. A voice behind him, smaller, breathless, trying to keep up. Just a little farther, he had said back then. He had believed it. Or maybe he had needed to. The wind howled, snapping him back. Caleb stopped. He stood there, staring into the storm, trying to steady himself, trying to find the line between past and present. But the mountain didn't care about lines. It folded time into itself, made everything feel close again, unfinished. He turned back. The cub hadn't moved. Snow had begun to collect along its side, soft at first, then heavier, like the mountain was already claiming it. Caleb let out a slow breath. "Damn it," he muttered, though there was no anger left in it. Only recognition. He walked back up the slope, each step deliberate now, not rushed, not panicked. When he reached the cub, he crouched beside it, brushing snow gently away from its face. Its eyes were closed. For a moment he thought. Then the chest rose. Barely, but enough. Caleb exhaled, something inside him loosening just a fraction. He slipped off his pack and pulled out a thermal blanket, wrapping it loosely around the cub's body. It didn't resist, didn't react at all. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know." His hands moved without hesitation now, steady despite the cold. He adjusted the blanket, secured it just enough to hold warmth without restricting movement. Then he hesitated. The cub wasn't going to walk, not like this. Caleb looked uphill. The ridge waited. Silent, unchanged, unforgiving. He reached down and slid his hands beneath the cub, lifting it carefully. It weighed almost nothing. That scared him more than if it had struggled. The moment he brought it close, the cub stirred faintly, its head shifting against his arm as if recognizing the change in position, not resisting it, but not leaning into it either, just accepting. Caleb adjusted his grip and stood. The added weight changed everything. His balance, his pace. The margin for error that had already been thin now felt razor sharp. One bad step and both of them would go down. He looked back one last time. The way down was still there, still possible, still easier. Caleb held that thought for a second longer than he should have, then he turned away from it. "All right," he said under his breath, more to himself than anything else. "We finish this." The wind surged again, louder now, as if in answer. Caleb took a step uphill. The cub held close against his chest and felt something shift, not outside, not in the storm or the mountain, but inside him. Not relief, not yet, but something steadier than hesitation. And as he climbed, he understood, with a clarity that left no room for argument. This time, he wasn't turning back. The slope narrowed into stone. Snow thinned along the ridge, stripped away by the wind until the ground beneath showed through, dark, uneven rock slick with ice. Caleb slowed, each step placed with care, his boots searching for edges that would hold. The cub lay quiet in his arms, its breath shallow but steady against his jacket, a faint rhythm that anchored him more than sight ever could. The mountain felt different here, not louder, not harsher, quieter. The wind still moved, but it no longer roared. It slipped through the rocks in low currents, like something cautious, unwilling to disturb what lay beyond the ridge. Caleb felt it before he understood it, a stillness that didn't belong to empty places. He knew this silence. It was the kind that waited. Caleb stepped between two jagged walls of stone, the narrow passage cutting deeper into the mountain. Snow gathered again on the other side, thicker, undisturbed, as if fewer things dared to cross into this basin. The light dimmed without clouds to explain it, filtered by the shape of the land itself. He stopped. For a moment he didn't move at all. The cub shifted slightly, a faint stir against his chest. Caleb lowered his gaze, then carefully bent his knees and set it down on the snow. It didn't collapse this time. It stood, unsteady, yes, but standing. Caleb stepped back a half pace, giving it space. The cub blinked, its eyes adjusting to the muted light, then turned its head slowly from side to side. Its breathing deepened, just a little, as if something in the air here made it easier. Caleb watched, waiting. Nothing obvious revealed itself. No movement in the distance, no shapes against the rocks, just the basin, holding its quiet like a secret too old to explain. "This is it?" Caleb murmured. The words sounded wrong the moment they left him. The cub took a step forward. Not far, not strong, but certain. Its paw pressed into untouched snow, leaving a mark that looked too small for the space around it. Then another step, and another. Caleb followed at a distance now, no longer guiding, no longer carrying. The cub moved slowly across the basin floor, weaving between low drifts and patches of exposed stone. It didn't hesitate anymore. It didn't stop to look back. That unsettled him. Back on the slope, it had always checked, always waited. Here, it didn't need to. Caleb's gaze shifted outward, scanning the basin with sharper focus now. That was when he noticed it. The faintest disruption along the far edge. A line across the snow that didn't belong to wind, too deliberate, too measured. He moved closer, knelt, brushed the surface with his glove. Beneath the top layer, the snow held a different texture, compacted, pressed, then softened again by time. A track. Old but not gone. Another crossed it at an angle, and another. Not random. Pattern. Caleb exhaled slowly, his breath steadying for the first time since the climb began. "You weren't guessing," he said quietly. The cub had already moved ahead, its small figure nearing the center of the basin. It paused there, lowering its head slightly, not in weakness this time, but in attention. Caleb rose and followed, slower now, more aware of each step, each shift in the air. The silence pressed closer, not empty, but full, layered with presence that didn't show itself all at once. The cub took another step, then stopped, its ears lifted. Caleb felt it too, a sound barely there, carried on the edge of the wind, not close enough to define, not loud enough to name, but real. He didn't move, didn't speak. The cub's body changed in that instant, not stronger, not healed, aligned. It straightened, its stance no longer collapsing inward, but reaching outward toward something Caleb couldn't yet see. Then, slowly, it turned its head back. Not fully, just enough. For a moment, its eyes met his again. There was no urgency in them now, no confusion, no question, only recognition. Caleb felt something in his chest loosen, though the cold remained. He didn't step closer, didn't reach out. Whatever this place was, whatever it held, it wasn't his to enter the same way. The cub looked at him for one breath longer, then turned forward again. Caleb followed its gaze into the basin, into the pale expanse where shape and shadow blurred together. The faint sound came again, clearer this time, echoing just enough to confirm what his mind had already begun to accept. They weren't alone. Caleb stood still, the wind brushing past him, like a warning he chose not to take. Every instinct he had told him to hold position, to wait, to let whatever moved in that distance decide the next step. The cub didn't hesitate. It moved forward again, slower now, but without struggle. Caleb watched it go, watched the small white shape cross into the deeper part of the basin where the snow thickened and the light dimmed further. The tracks beneath it grew clearer the closer it came, layered over one another, leading in and out, a path that had always existed, just hidden well enough to be missed. Caleb's hands lowered to his sides. He understood now, not everything, but enough. He didn't need to carry it anymore. And as the cub reached the edge of that unseen boundary, Caleb realized that whatever came next, it wouldn't be decided by him. The air shifted before anything could be seen. It wasn't a sound at first, but a presence, subtle, layered into the stillness, as if the basin itself had begun to breathe differently. Caleb felt it along his shoulders, a quiet awareness that moved through the cold and settled deep in his bones. The cub stopped. It stood at the edge of a shallow drift, its small body outlined against the pale expanse, head lifted slightly as if listening to something too distant for human ears. Its breathing had steadied. Not strong, not yet, but no longer fragile in the same way. Caleb didn't step forward. He stayed where he was, boots planted in the snow, hands loose at his sides. The urge to move closer, to guide, to make sure the moment didn't slip away. It was there, sharp and familiar. But he let it pass. This part didn't belong to him. The wind thinned, almost respectful now, brushing past in soft currents that no longer pushed or pulled. The silence deepened, but it wasn't empty. It held something just beyond sight, something that had been here long before either of them arrived. Then came the sound, low, distant, a call that carried across the basin like a memory rising through the cold. The cub answered, not loudly, not with strength, but with certainty. It took a step forward. Caleb felt his chest tighten, not from fear, not from the cold, but from the weight of what that step meant. There was nothing dramatic in it, no sudden change, just a quiet continuation of a path that had always been there, waiting to be followed. The cub moved again, each step more stable than the last. It didn't look back, not at first. It walked toward the sound, toward the unseen shapes that waited beyond the low ridge of snow and shadow. Caleb's eyes followed every movement, memorizing the rhythm, the way the small body carried itself now, not dragged forward by desperation, but pulled by something deeper, something it recognized. Halfway across the basin, it slowed, then stopped. For a long moment, nothing moved. Caleb didn't breathe. The cub turned its head, this time fully. Their eyes met across the distance. There was no plea in that gaze now, no confusion, no need, only a quiet knowing. Caleb felt it like a hand placed gently against something inside him that had been closed for too long. He didn't raise his arm, didn't call out. He understood finally that anything he added to this moment would take away from it. So he stood still and let it be enough. The cub watched him for a heartbeat longer. Then it turned away. It crossed the final stretch without hesitation, its white form fading gradually into the shifting light and shadow of the basin. The outline blurred, softened, and then, without ceremony, was gone. The silence returned, not empty, complete. Caleb remained where he was, the cold settling back into his jacket, into his hands, into the steady rhythm of his breath. The space in front of him felt different now, not because something had been taken, but because something had been returned. He looked down at the tracks in the snow, small, uneven at first, then stronger, leading forward, not back. Caleb closed his eyes for a moment, the wind brushing lightly across his face. The mountain stood as it always had, unmoved, indifferent, vast. But for the first time in years, it no longer felt like something he had turned away from. It felt like something he had finished. He opened his eyes and turned. The way down stretched before him, no easier than before, no safer. But it was clear now, not because the storm had lifted, it hadn't, but because he no longer needed to look over his shoulder. Each step he took carried him farther from the basin, from the place that had held its silence until he was ready to hear it. He didn't rush, didn't hesitate. And as he descended, Caleb understood something he hadn't been able to name before, that some journeys don't begin when you choose them. They begin when something small, fragile, and impossible asks you to follow, and you finally do. Sometimes helping doesn't mean saving, it means walking beside something until it can stand on its own. This story reminds us that true responsibility isn't about control, but about knowing when to let go. If this journey stayed with you, there are more stories waiting, stories about quiet courage, second chances, and the unseen bonds that shape who we become.
If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts and follow Lion's Quiet Stories for more.